again, welcome everybody. From darkness to light. It's the great theme of decisions we make and the struggles that result from those decisions and the grace that comes to us in our efforts to redeem ourselves. It's an ancient story, and yet it's our story. Each and every one of us go through innumerable struggles with the demons of our not-so-good things, as Padma put it, and the angels and devas of our positive traits. This churning of the ocean of milk is a very ancient story, and like all ancient stories, there are many versions of this story. And so I chose one particular version to share with some of you heathens and pagans who don't know anything about it. So, blessed by our friends who do. And so it is, and so it has been said, that long, long time ago, there was peace and harmony in the world. Perhaps peace and harmony from time to time in our own hearts. And then something happens, doesn't it? And in the case of the story, something did happen. For it was that a great sage, perhaps like you and I in our hearts, in our souls, received in the upliftment of his experience a very fragrant garland, or so the story goes, and in an upliftment of devotion, offered that fragrant garland to the King of Gods, Indira. And the King of Gods, who perhaps is that greatest virtue of all of our virtues, maybe it's wisdom, maybe it's devotion, in any case, offers it to the King, Indira. But so often happens when we are uplifted, and I know from many, many years of taking seclusion, a week of time alone with God and meditation and prayer, that you come out on top of the world, and then you come back to the world, and so often something happens. You say something triggers you. And in this case, Indira laid the fragrant garland on the head of his white elephant, Airavata. And Airavata, being of, shall we say, a lower caste of maybe animals and lower nature, didn't appreciate it. In fact, found intoxication that was uncharacteristic to his own nature and threw the garland off onto the ground. Well, the soul, uplifted, was sorely insulted and said to King Indira, you and your virtues, you and the gods who are personifications of our own higher self, you will lose your power. And so it was that the half-brother of our virtues, the half-brothers of our gods, immediately sensed an opportunity to retake the kingdom for itself. And so the asuras, the demons, the evil aspects of ourselves, the selfish parts of ourselves, immediately began their attack on the kingdom of the devas in their beautiful citadels in the heaven of virtues, and beat the devas back. The devas were beside themselves. What could they do? Well, they ran to who else? Lord Vishnu, the calm and compassionate, seated on Shesha, the great serpent in the ocean of milk. He received them calmly. And after they pleaded with him, what can we do? We have lost our kingdom. The kingdom of the soul has been taken over by King Ego. What shall we do? And Vishnu had a solution very calmly. He said to them, you need to resurrect from the ocean of your karma, from the ocean of prana, from the ocean of milk, the nectar of your soul's native bliss. The nectar of bliss needs to be brought back. However, you are sorely weakened. You have fallen from the kingdom, and you cannot do it alone. You will need to negotiate with the lower parts of yourself, the asuras, and you will have to engage because together they are the full energy that you possess, and yet even that is not enough. And so you need to negotiate with your half-brothers, your negative parts of yourself, your karma, in other words, in order to find the strength to churn the ocean of milk and raise the nectar of immortality. And so they began their negotiations with King Bali, the king of the Asuras. They were suspicious at first, of course, as they tended to be of most things, skeptical, no doubt. But the idea of sipping the nectar of immortality appealed to them. And so they agreed to come together with the devas and churn the ocean of milk. But how? How to do this? And so, again, Vishnu had a solution. He said, go to Mount Mandara, and pull Mount Mandara, which is the spine, which is locked at the base of the spine in the Muladhara chakra. And go to Mount Mandara and lift Mount Mandara and go within, in other words. Use the discipline. Now, throughout the process by which the nectar was raised, at different moments, Vishnu would appear and give the final helping hand. In this case, he metamorphized into Garuda, the great eagle. And the great eagle was able to lift the power of the spine and have them able to access the spine through tapasya, through discipline, through the yogic techniques that we've been given. But how to churn the spine, the prana, the karma in the spine. And so Vishnu said, go to Shiva. Ask him to give to you Vasuki, the great serpent that surrounds his neck. And Shiva, all beneficent, said, take Vasuki. And wrap Vasuki around the mountain and pull from both ends and churn the sea of karma, the sea of milk. And so the devas, who are a little brighter than the asuras, they smiled to themselves and they said, Asuras, why don't you hold the head of Vasuki, the great serpent, thinking that was an honor. And the asuras, being a little bit dumb, thought it was an honor. Well, we'll see in a minute. And they instead grabbed the tail and they began churning the spine, churning the samskars, the vrittis, and awakening the chakras back and forth. But as they did so, the serpent, Vasuki, being a serpent and being poisonous, began to emit a poisonous stench, which burnt the hair right off the asuras, and it was kind of smelly. But they endured it because they wanted the Amrita too. And then the devas at the other end of the tail were smiling because as the movement back and forth, a beautiful, gentle breeze came and blessed them in their Herculean efforts. But then something terrible happened, because out of the mouth of Vasuki came the hala, the great poison of delusion that threatened to destroy all of the world of my consciousness, all of the efforts they were making. This black and green poison came out of Vasuki and rose up, and the asuras and the devas fell back screaming, and they ran to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva blesses all people, good and bad. Anyone who puts out the effort, he will give them a boon, and they can figure out from their consequences of what they seek, what the consequences are. And so Shiva reached out his hand, and he scooped up the hala, and he ate the great poison. And his throat, Nilakanta, is the name for the blue-throated Shiva. But Parvati, a little bit concerned about her husband Shiva swallowing the great delusion, she reached out her hand and held his throat so it wouldn't go down and hurt him in any way. Well, they were spared that great destruction, and sometimes it happens on the spiritual path. There you are making what seems to be progress in your prayers, your meditations, and in your service, and then, as we say sometimes around here, a karmic bomb. That's the hala. Sometimes something happens to us. We think we're on top of the world, as sometimes I have after a seclusion, and nothing and no one can harm me. And then I remember one day somebody called me up, and it just triggered a fiery serpent-like response, and my seclusion went down in flames in 1 second. And so it was. These things happened to the devotee. Someone came to me just recently and said the very same thing. I'm on the top of the world. I'm in bliss. And I said, yeah, that's great. But what if you're not? All the great saints of East and West have said that there comes a time when the darkness comes, and the consolations of the light that we have been given, the upliftment and wisdom and so forth that we receive is snatched from us. Some call that the dark night of the soul. Others say that before the coming of samadhi even, the lights go out. The darkless dark, the lightless light. And only by faith alone do you stand tall and receive whatever comes next. And so it was with the Hala Hala. But Shiva, again, the divine grace, which always rescues us when we make the effort, was gone. So they resumed the churning of the ocean, bit by bit, one by one, the great gifts, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, which are the gifts of the chakras, began to emerge out of the ocean of prana, one by one. And we saw just a few of those great gifts, didn't we? We saw, let's see, the great cow, that's the Muladhara, that's the Ahimsa, Yama, the conquering of Ahimsa. The cow is so gentle and so giving and so has experienced and emanates harmlessness, grace. And so it is. And then also we saw the tree of life, the tree of wisdom, whose fruits and whose leaves never yellow and never fall, for they are eternal. And the moon, the reflected light of the soul, rises into the spiritual eye as it moves from the seat of ego to the seat of the soul, this point between the eyebrows. And then finally, the nectar of bliss, because in the silence, in the wilderness of complete receptivity, the joy wells up. Kundalini rises with all of these gifts, and the final gift is our very nature, the nature of bliss, which appears. But in the story, when the nectar appeared, when the cupbearer of the nectar appeared out of the ocean of karma, out of the ocean of milk, the asura's eyes got really big. They were looking forward to the nectar of immortality, because they thought with that they could continue to defeat the devas. But then Lakshmi came. That beautiful appearance of all that is good, right, and true, prosperous, and spiritually advanced and in union or bliss, she came and all bowed. But as they did so, the tricky, skeptical, treacherous asuras reached out and grabbed the cup from the cupbearer. Aha! Vishnu, he had to pull another rescue. He immediately transformed himself into the goddess Mohini. Now, I could talk a lot about the goddess Mohini, but I probably shouldn't, because she was really beautiful. And she excited the asuras in a certain way that we won't explore here today. And their tongues came out, their eyes got big, and they went into a trance staring at this beautiful Mohini. And then Mohini, in words of comfort and so forth, caressing, said to the asuras, "Dear friends, don't fight over the nectar of immortality. Give me the cup, and I will share it with each one of you." And so she had the asuras line up, let's see, on the left, and the devas on the right. And she said, "Come forward, and I will bless you with the nectar." And so they all came forward one by one and took a sip of the nectar. But Mohini, being Vishnu, was very clever. To the devas, she gave a sip of the nectar. But to the asuras, they only got water. But they were in this hungry trance, shall we say, as they came up to her and like this. And then when it was done, the spell was broken, and they realized they had been tricked. And they were very, very angry. But then the devas had the nectar and the power of immortality and banished the asuras back to where they came from. That is the end of your story and the end of my story and the end in